ABC, Vinyl Community, it's Mazzy again. Oldies but goodies. Can't get much better than Buddy Holly, right? In rock and roll. Influenced so many artists. Decided I'm putting an oldies but goodies little video together because I don't see a lot. There's one-offs here and there. And the thing that bugs me about the oldies section of record stores, and it goes back to 1973, 74, when I worked in record stores, in large record stores especially, maybe not so much in the small stores, although I see this when you're organizing collections, and probably maybe in your personal collection, like in mine, as I showed you if you watched my home tour music room video, I kind of put everything together except jazz and collection, things like that, my Beatles. But you go into a record store and there's an oldies section. Like go to Tower Records back in the day, you go to Amoeba back in the day, an oldies but goodies section, and you see Buddy Holly and Elvis Presley and Richie Valens and the Everly Brothers and Chubby Checkers, and you see all that old stuff in the oldies section, right? Okay, and this was back in the 70s even. All that stuff at Tower Records, the record factory where I worked, the warehouse records, the oldies section. Little Richard, the oldies section. Now think of it. These artists were late 50s into the 60s, early 60s. So this is maybe 10, 15, 20 years tops, not even that. They wouldn't be there. But the Beatles, not in the oldies section. The Doors, not in the oldies section. I mean, shit, in 2000, Nirvana, not in the oldies section. That was 20 fucking years ago, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, right? It's oldies. Is it because those artists weren't topical selling anymore, that the Doors maybe were kind of hip, or the Velvet Underground was hip? Why wasn't the Velvet Underground in the fucking oldies section, right? Anyway, I'm not digressing. This is serious shit you think about when you talk about record stores and organizing records. Why, just because there are these kind of classic rock and roll things, hey, let's put the Alan Parsons fucking Project in the oldies section now. That was 30 years ago. Anyway, so I'm going to showcase just my vinyl. I have a ton more on CDs and digital of oldies but goodies. So anything that was in the oldies section, I'm going to show you. And these are records that I love and influenced me a lot. I started out with this. This is a box set that came out in the 70s of pretty much every take. It was a MCA Great Britain Choral UK edition, and it has every stop and start take. Beautiful collection of, you see it behind my whack-a-moles usually on the shelf out there. It has the Lubbock, Texas, Western and bop music. It's got Nashville. It's got New York City. It's got Clovis, New Mexico. The best of Buddy Holly. And it won't go through the whole thing. There's a booklet in here. Cool collection. But I'd say again, all these artists that I'm going to show you, you've heard of. And if you haven't, you've heard bands, and you have actually favorite bands that are very influenced by these artists. I'm not going to show the influences, but in terms of Buddy Holly, this is actually a cool collection, a mono collection. So if you see this, it's worth picking up. Most of them are usually pretty dog-eared, and but it's a great sounding record. And the Buddy Holly story. What label is this? Coral Records. That was his label. But Buddy Holly, obviously the Beatles were very influenced. They did Words of Love. Again, my generation, I was turned on to Buddy Holly by the Beatles during doing Words of Love. And publishing-wise, in the publishing world, Paul McCartney, who is the biggest independent publisher in the country in terms of catalogs, owns the Buddy Holly catalog, the publishing for it. But I'd say two records that are worth getting, and go to places like Audio Productions, because they are Analog Productions, excuse me. These two, pick these up. These are as close as you can get to archival audiophile records of these two records. Buddy Holly, Peggy Sue, Valley of Tears, Every Man, Every Day, Words of Love, Rave On, It's Crazy Feeling. Great cover, great package, great record, great sounding record. You can get this at Music Direct, places online. And this one, The Chirping Crickets. These are basically the only two you really need. And instead of going through those misty, musty used records and looking for those, pick those up. I highly recommend those. Again, you can't talk about oldies. And again, I'm really kind of emphasizing rock and roll when it comes to oldies but goodies. But Chuck Berry. Now, if you find this great, this is a great chess collection, mono, and it sounds fabulous if you get a good copy of it. So out of all the greatest hits, this is probably the best. There's been a ton of new releases. This is a 70s reissue, which is pretty good, but this sounds better. When it comes down to it, this sounds better. But 28 greats, and there's a box set recently based on this and expanded. Always worth getting, but you want the real deal. This is what to get for Chuck Berry. Little Richard, I only have comps of Little Richard. This is a reissue, specialty reissue. Actually, is this his first album? Little Richard and his band. Again, influenced so many artists, Paul McCartney especially, with his vocal style. Good Golly, Miss Molly. Wow. It's on here too. Lucille, The Girl Can't Help It. Have you seen that film, The Girl Can't Help It? You need to watch that movie with all these great artists here. That's from the movie, A Girl Can't Help It. But again, this is a reissue, and this is a 70s issue, which is not bad. I got this in the 70s. It's the original hits. Long Tall Sally. There's the one, I heard it from the Beatles first. Jenny Jenny. Heard that a lot in the 70s, but Bruce Springsteen used to cover that. Slippin' Slidin', Hey Hey Hey. Tutti Frutti, the usual, Rip It Up. So good, so good. All these artists, I would consider, is necessary in any kind of cool archival collection. The archivist, Amanda, if she was visiting, she would tell you that too, probably. But I know this stuff. I like this stuff. Another one, a lot of these you can just get comps of. You don't need the whole thing. I did show a series, search it out. There's an earlier video I did on this great series of Charlie imports from the 70s of Sun Session. But the $1 Million Quartet, Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, Elvis Presley, and Johnny Cash. You got to have the killer himself, Jerry Lee Lewis, who married his 14-year-old cousin. God, can you imagine if he was? Well, he is alive now, but if that was today in today's standards. Don't Be Cruel, Goodnight Irene. This is a UK comp produced by Sam Phillips, who was the sun goddess, the sun man. Another sun comp, the original Jerry Lee Lewis, Crazy Arms, Great Balls of Fire, Breathless. Great song, Breathless. But you need a Jerry Lee Lewis record, so a good comp. I don't know, there's probably some out now, but find a good comp. Don't get a rechannel stereo. Find a mono one if possible, because that's the great stuff here. Obviously later, all those are rock stars from the 70s would just rediscover or influenced by these. They all wanted to jump on the bandwagon and do a record together. So this is live in London, London sessions with guest artists, and it's got, Roy Gallagher, Peter Frampton, Kenny Jones, Mickey Jones, Albert Lee, Alvin Lee, Klaus Vormann, Gary Wright. Decent record, kind of a fun comp if you find it cheap. I wouldn't say this is the first one to get, but the killer Jerry Lee Lewis, there you go. In between, I'm going to show some one-offs, in a way novelty. The Big Bopper, Chantilly Lace, kind of a one-hit wonder singer. Interesting note, if you don't know this, the Big Bopper was on the airplane with Ritchie Valens and Buddy Holly that crashed. So they all died together. And it was Waylon Jennings, who was with the Crickets and Buddy Holly at the time, who gave up his seat because the Big Bopper was in a rush and needed to get to the next place, and obviously could have been Waylon Jennings in that plane, but instead the Big Bopper, who was pretty much a DJ. So Chantilly Lace was a novelty. This is a 70s import comp, fun record, not essential, but kind of in that oldies section again. Again, as a one-off, I have a really important, great artist, but again, a comp's fine. These Sire comps that came out in the 70s were great. But Del Shannon, singer, guitar player, Rebel Rouser, Ramrod, sounds like the soundtrack to a porno movie, right? Detour, 40 Miles on the Bad Road, Rebel Walk, God, great double comp from the 70s. These Sire records, there's a whole series of these with similar covers, are worth getting. I don't know if they're cheap anymore, but again, in the oldies section, Duane Eddy. Now another important group of artists, and I don't see a lot of love around here either, but the Everly Brothers. I mean, John and Paul listened to the Everly Brothers. Actually, Paul wrote a song for them in the late 70s on the Wings of a Nightingale that was on an album of theirs. But you know, Kathy's Clown, Bye Bye Love, Wake Up Little Susie, Walking in the Rain. There's a Ebony Eyes. There's a great CD box set that I believe it's 4 CDs that showcases their entire career. So I'm not going to be snooty telling you have to get a record, but again, you need an Everly Brothers record in your collection. This is a late 60s, what is it, 68? I'm thinking 68, 69, 70. Great record. This is produced by Lenny Waronker at Warner Brothers. Roots album, kind of their country rock-ish. Mama Tried, which is a song by Merle Haggard. Shady Grove, which is a traditional song. T for Texas. So in the country realm of the Everly Brothers, but really good record. I don't know if this was a reissue, might have been a Record Store Day comp or one of the Rhino reissues, but sounds fabulous. It's a record you should get. This is a record too, Songs Our Daddy Taught Us. Wonderful album. The whole album was virtually covered last 3 years by Norah Jones and Billy Joe, what's his name, from Green Day. But this is another great album of the Everly Brothers. Gone, Gone, Gone. The song was covered by, in the last 10 years, by Robert Plant and Alison Krauss. Great collection on the Warner Brothers years. That was their second incarnation, actually. But really, really fun stuff. Really good stuff. Their harmonies were amazing. But again, it kind of started the tradition of brothers hating themselves, hating each other. Maybe they hated themselves too, like the Oasis brothers, Gallagher brothers, the Davis brothers of the Kinks, Ray and Dave. It's amazing. A date with the Everly Brothers. So if you want to have a date, you buy this record and you go out with them. Take them home, get them drunk. They do Lucille, Love Hurts, Kathy's Clown, which is a wonderful song. I love that song. Great production, great arrangements. Phil and Don, 1960 record. So, Everly Brothers, an important part for your oldies collection. Now, I'm saying all these artists, you can't not have any Elvis records in your collection. Now, this is a musty, smelly comp, British RCA collection that I found. Someone found in a barn when they bought a place up in upstate Washington. They bought an alpaca farm, my good friend, and she found this crate of records, and I only, out of 150 records, I salvaged maybe 10 or 15. They're pretty rank. I remember this. We sold this in the 70s. Pretty decent overall comp. I don't remember how great it sounds, but Elvis Presley, you need some Elvis, and I have a ton of Elvis on compact disc. But obviously the 56 sessions, the early Elvis. Remember what John Lennon said about Elvis, that when Elvis died, I think his response was, Elvis died when he went into the army, because he liked that early stuff. The Sun Session stuff, Heartbreak Hotel, Money Honey, Blue Suede Shoes, written by Carl Perkins. Hound Dog, Lieber and Stoller song. I mean, Don't Be Cruel, right? But this is a great RCA. This is a mono record reissue from the 70s comp that came out. Early Elvis Presley. I even like, I don't have it here really on, I have a lot on CD, but I don't have it on LP. I love his gospel stuff. I'm a gospel music fan as well. Here's his, when he ripped off The Clash for their cover of their London Calling album. The first Elvis RCA record. Restored to mono. This is a reissue, not original. But great record. What's on here? Blue Suede Shoes, Just Because, Blue Moon, Tutti Frutti, I Got a Woman. I mean, you need Elvis Presley records, right? Oh, I do actually. Lord Jesus, thank me, Jesus. Elvis is going to sing for you. How great thou art. How great thou art. In the garden, stand by me. By and by. If the Lord wasn't walking by my side, who would be walking by my side? My favorite of the soundtracks, his soundtrack, you could go crazy just buying all the soundtracks. Again, I have them on compact discs, but King Creole, New Orleans. This is a great film, and I think I mentioned it in one of my videos somewhere. One of my favorites of the Elvis, aside from Jailhouse Rock. It really shows his acting chops, great acting, great cinematography, not one of the later kind of, cheesy kind of films of Elvis Presley, which he made a lot. Still all worth it. But the music on this is great. The song Crawfish alone is wonderful. So I suggest picking this one up if you want one of his soundtracks too. Something a little different. Oh, Way Down in the Jungle Room. This was a comp or a record that was first released about 3 or 4 years ago, 2016, so 3 years ago. And the Jungle Room was this kind of den, man cave he had down at Graceland downstairs where they would jam and record and demo, and this was finally released. If you see this in stores now, it's probably still around here and there. Pick it up. It's a fun record. Great sounding, a few early takes, stop and starts, and the way he was demoing for songs. And I wouldn't know which album. I'm not that much of an expert that would know, but this is a fantastic record. Way Down in the Jungle Room. Look at that. That's actually the Jungle Room. We're talking about, okay, you got to see these pictures, right? We're talking about Vegas. Any of you who live in California, who've ever driven on the on Highway 101 from San Francisco down to LA to Santa Barbara, if you've been to the Madonna Inn, Google the Madonna Inn near San Luis Obispo, kind of that area. Each room is a theme room. There's a jungle room, the cave room. It's totally like Vegas. Great place to stay if you want to take a drive on the California coast, close to the coast. You can take a offshoot day trip and go to the castle, Hearst Castle. It's really kind of a wonderful thing. Moody Blue. This is a album that I got recorded on tour live. This is my 70s copy. Someone from the label gave it to me, and back in the 70s, it came out on blue vinyl. I know people hate when I touch my record there. I always get these friggin' comments. The grease on my hand doesn't get on that much. I'm sorry. I care for my records. My records are in pristine shape, but give me a break, right? Anyway, okay record, fun to have, not essential. Elvis soundtrack from the NBC TV special. I think this was 1968. Is that? Yeah, 1968. So it just celebrated its 50th year last year. But you can't go wrong with that. Look at those lights behind them. This might be I think I'll make this the picture. Freeze frame. Okay. I did showcase the other day on one of my videos, Ricky Nelson. Now, Ricky Nelson, underrated big time. Ricky Nelson from Ozzie and Harriet, Teen Idol, amazing. The sound of his records, I think at one point he played with the Jordanaires, Elvis's backup behind him. Great records. Great records. They hold up. They're timeless. That's a United Artists comp, which if you see this, grab it because it sounds really good. Also, here's where the Teen Idol comes in on the original Imperial Records. Ricky Sings Again. This is a French pressing. Not that he sings in French. But great stuff. You know, these records you can usually find pretty cheap. And then Sings Again. Oh, this is an American pressing. American mono pressing. You know, look at that pretty boy face. But that's why maybe he wasn't taken as seriously at the time. But there's a great Joel Selvin biography on him, and if you're interested to read that, it's really great. Very underrated, and I recommend anyone should get some Ricky Nelson. More songs by Ricky. Oh, God. Is there anything in here I need to know? No poster, no nothing. Original liner. But little rip there. I need those man cave rip things. Rip covers, sleazy things. Not sleazy. Sleevey things. Anyway, Ricky Nelson. And lastly, I showcased it just the other day. The great 70s album with Garden Party. John brought his walrus. Yoko brought her walrus. That's the line in the song. Really good record. Kind of a good country record. So pick this up too if you see it. I'm telling you, so much to buy. Got that, Buddy Holly. I think I'm going to end up with, and again, it's not definitive. There's so many artists that I don't have here. When it comes to oldies, a lot of influences, and but I'd say one of the great vocalists of the late 50s, early 60s is Roy Orbison. A lot of fans, younger fans, got into him later in life when he came back, and he was part of the Traveling Wilburys with George Harrison, Tom Petty, Bob Dylan, and Jeff Lynne from Electric Light Orchestra. Jeff produced that record, but these wonderful records, Oh Pretty Woman, you know the song, it's a great song. Leah, what a voice, right? I mean, his voice was great till the day he died. It's not like some of these artists that just ain't happen anymore as they get older. He wasn't even that old. Crying, oh God, this is amazing too. Oh, this is a wonderful album. Cry, Only the Lonely. Only the Lonely, a perfect song, right? Only the Lonely. Oh Pretty Woman, did I already show that? Crying, yeah, I probably did. And In Dreams. Now, in Blue Bayou, you know, Blue Bayou got big again because of Linda Ronstadt in the 70s. This is a decent comp. Can't remember if it's mono or not. Okay, not bad. Let me look here. It's on Monument Records. Came out about 1972. You know, I would say if you need to get Roy Orbison, if you want to get the box set, which is reissues, I think you can still find that. But if you just want to get a good comp, this is pretty good. This is the more recent comp, and it sounds okay. I don't remember. I haven't really A-B'd these to compare them. You know, the whole Orbison estate, his wife and kids have taken over and done some pretty good reissues. This is 4 records. The songs, again, were produced by anywhere from Sam Phillips to later T-Bone Burnett to and Otis Nelson Wilbury and Jeff Lynne, because he had that real comeback, which I'll show you in a minute. This is pretty good, but I'm a big Roy Orbison fan, so I had to pick this up because of the overall collection. This is an interesting record. Not quite as great. If you pick it up cheap, you get it. Produced by David Lynch. I don't know if you remember, Blue Velvet also gave Roy Orbison a resurgence because his some of his music was used in the film Blue Velvet, and this comp is Roy Orbison re-recording all his hits, his big songs. Executive producer was Barbara Orbison, produced by Michael Utley and Roy Orbison, and several of the songs were produced by David Lynch, T-Bone Burnett, and Roy Orbison. So, very surreal. This is an 80s comp, an 80s thing. A lot of it just all re-recorded his old songs. So these are re-recordings, not the originals. Still a fun record, and his voice was still great. But this big comeback, which he actually had a hit, and you know, the Wilburys pretty much are all on here, and Tom Petty's band, and this was produced by Jeff Lynne, you know, and the big hit here was Mystery, She's a Mystery to Me. Windsurfer also. So this was his resurgence, and then soon after this, in fact, just between Wilburys 1 and Wilburys 2, he passed. And what a great voice. So that is Mazzy's oldies section. Why are these artists in the oldies, right? And why is Bob Dylan's not in the oldies? Is it because he's still making records? Hey, why isn't Leonard Skinner in the oldies? Why isn't, you know, A, B, C, D? Say anybody. Pick an artist. Why aren't they in the? Why isn't Black Sabbath in the oldies? Right? Give me a break. So, Mazzy loves you, and thanks again for all your viewings and comments and subscribing, and we'll see you next time. The background has been playing since we've been talking. This box set. So long, VC.